Hello and welcome back. I'm Scott with BikeRide.com, and today we've got a fun video. We're taking a look at the VanPowers bike, the City Vanture. And one of the interesting options available for this bike is that you can choose to either have it delivered to you assembled, or you can save yourself a little bit of money and get the e-bike disassembled and shipped to you in a box for you to put together yourself. I'm always interested in a bit of a challenge, and I love building bikes. So let's take a look at what they send you and how easy it is to set up the VanPowers City Vanture. All right, so let's get things started. We're gonna do this exactly how you would receive the box, and we're only gonna try to use the tools and the stuff that they've given us available with the bike. So what you're gonna receive is gonna be a large box like this. Let's open it up and see what we've got here. So it comes apart into two sections like this. And right here, you can see that once you've popped open the box, you've got a series of boxes here, and you can see one of those brake rotors exposed for you to see already. So let's start taking some of the stuff out of the box and see what we've got here. There's a lot of this packing foam, which we're gonna keep beside us here. And you have sort of a variety of boxes, and they do seem to have these numbers. This one says number 4. Some connections with these kind of Velcro straps. Okay, so inside of this box, we've got your front fork and the belt drive for the bike, as well as the seat post. And as we look, we're gonna see that there's numbers on everything here. So this is number 20, this is number 12 for your fork. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and take these out. And we're gonna lay them out on the table here in front of us to just see what we've got. Your cranks, and they're labeled number 15. This box is labeled the accessory box, and the user manual is inside. So we're gonna set that there. All that we have left inside of the box is the 2 wheel sets, and both wheel sets are coming to you fully assembled. So the wheel set has both the brake and the hub motor. Everything's on there. The wheel is not inflated. That's the only thing. And then we're left with 6 boxes, which contain all the items that we're gonna need. And they're held together with these nice little sections of Velcro. And we're gonna start by opening up the accessories box. We've got a 19mm and a 13mm wrench, as well as an adjustable screwdriver, and we've got the manual right here, which we're going to be following along with. We've got a set of reflectors for the bike. Looks like a front and rear. We've got a red and a silver reflector. We've got a set of Welgo flat pedals, very simple cleated pedals. And then at the bottom, we've got a little toolkit here. So this is outlined. We've got an 8mm, 6mm, 5, 4, and 3mm Allen keys. And then we have a crank bolt, some kickstand bolts, gasket bolts, cable guide bolts, a frame spare bolt, and a cable guide spare bolt. So this is what we're gonna be doing all of the assembly with, is this little toolkit right here. So we're gonna set this aside, and we're gonna try to do this with only those set of tools. Now let's take a look at what we have in box number 4 here. And it does have this little stand coming off the bottom, which is a little strange. Okay, and in here we have our bottom bracket assembly. So this is piece number 4. This is the entire bottom bracket. I'm gonna go ahead and set up my tools and kind of get things organized here, and then we're gonna tear into the manual and take a look at what it says for us to do. Now that we have everything laid out in close to the order that we need, we have parts ranging from 1 up to number 20. And now let's take a look at the manual and see what we're gonna do. So you've got an appendix of the bike parts from part 1 to part 20. So it asks you to actually go ahead and try to lay the bike out in the way that it has set up here. So we're gonna go ahead and try to get this bike laid out. The first step that we're going to take is we're going to be threading this cord through the top of the head tube. So from piece number 2 through to piece number 1. So we're just going to slide this cord through into the next section. You're just going to have to try to work your fingers in. And then it's going to go up, and then it's going to go right back. Through the top tube, through effectively, giving yourself a little bit of slack to do so. And then you're going to tension that a little bit so that we have that cord running through the top of the head tube. Now we're going to go ahead and we are going to connect the charging port. These are these two small yellow holes that we have. They're pretty clear what connect to each other, and they're going to connect together. And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to slide that port into there, making sure that we line up the logo. So we want to have all the numbers and the logos facing up. So now that we've pulled that wire through and we've connected the charging port, we're just going to slide the two pieces together, but we're not going to tighten the bolts yet. Next, we're going to take a 3mm Allen key and remove the 4 hex bolts on the bottom of the bottom bracket piece, piece number 5. And that is going to allow us to pop out and remove the bottom panel, which is going to give us access to the bottom of this bottom bracket. Now we're going to set aside that panel and the 4 screws and make sure we don't lose those. Next, we're going to go ahead and slide piece number 4 onto piece number 2, and we're going to make sure that we feed these 2 wires through the bottom and through that open port that you now have at the bottom. You're going to keep the numbers up so that that bottom bracket is now sitting on the bottom of the bike. Next, you'll be connecting part 5 and part 6. So part 6 is this seat post, and you've got some blue protective film on here, which you can just remove. And part 5 is this center triangle. So we're going to slide the seat post through. We're going to slide the bottom in. Now you're going to want to make sure that this top piece number 5 sits right at the point where you can see the paint changes color from silver to black. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to be connecting number 3. So this cable that you worked through previously is going to slide through into the top tube, and it's going to come out of this cable hole where the brake tube is coming out. Okay, perfect. So using that zip tie, you're able to get it out. And then you're going to want to make sure that that number 3 is facing up and slide that through. All right, so once you've got the triangle together, make sure that you've loosened all the bolts, because some of the bolts might be a little bit tight from the factory still. So if you're having any trouble getting any of that tubing in, make sure that you've loosened those off. Because when you're complete, you should be finished with a triangle like this with none of the bolts tightened yet. So now we're gonna move on to the next step. So the next step is that we're gonna be tightening the bolts on the frame. So they want us to make sure that we have all of our cabling coming out of the correct places. We're gonna take off all of this blue tape that's around each connection point, and then we're gonna make sure that we don't have any gaps between any of these sections. And we're gonna do that by placing the frame upright as we tighten it so we can apply pressure. So let's go ahead and get this blue tape off. And we are gonna start. They've also asked us to make sure that all of the numbers and the arrows are on the same plane. So we're gonna set this upright like this so that we can apply pressure, and you see how that just snapped into place. We're gonna make sure that those top two are set. And then we're gonna start on the one side. Now, once you've taken all the play out of these, you're gonna go, and they've given you a sequence at which to tighten. So you're gonna go A, B, C, and D, and then you're gonna go to the other side and do it again. A, B, C, and D. And you do get a little bit of play out of these each time that you do this, and they've told you to go and do this 5 times. They want you to get to a Newton meter of 20, which is quite a high Newton meter. It takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely worth it to go through and do this exactly how they say to, because you definitely get more play out of these bolts each time that you go and do it. So now we've finished the tightening guide. Next, we'll be connecting part 7 and part 8, which are the rear chain stays to the main section of the frame that we just completed. So you're gonna need both 4mm Allen wrenches, and they suggest that you place the frame of the bike like so. Now we're gonna take piece number 7 first, which is the left seat stay, and you're gonna wanna make sure that you take the screws out. The screws are already in place. You're gonna pull those, and then you're just gonna slide the seat stay over. The screws are going to go back in, and you're going to insert them from the opposite side and tighten. Now, these screws require you to use a 4mm wrench on each side of the screw in order to tighten it, or else they might just loosen off. So you've got 2 little 4mm wrenches here, and we're going to tighten these up. So you're going to lock these in and tighten them, but not still leave a little bit of wiggle room so that the piece can move. Next, we're gonna be taking the belt and we're gonna place it around the right seat stay so that it's sitting around the back of the seat stay and coming forward and over the cranks. Next, we're gonna be removing the bolts for the upper seat stays. So you've got 4 bolts here that you're gonna remove. You're gonna set them aside. I'm gonna try not to lose them. And the rear 2 also have a bolt. Now we'll be placing part number 9 and part number 11. We're going to make sure that the arrows are pointed up. Part number 9 is the left seat stay, and part number 11 is the right seat stay. And we're just going to lightly tighten these, not too much. Make sure that we place our bottoms in as well before we tighten the top. And then we'll do the same with the right seat stay. Now that you have the rear seat stay together, you can go ahead and tighten up all of the remaining bolts, starting with those first 4 bolts that you did with the 2 4mm. Now I'm going to use the 4mm to tighten these 4 bolts that we had. Next, you're going to take piece number 12. You're going to remove the rubber stopper from the top using a 5mm Allen key. We're going to remove the top cap. And you're going to want to make sure that as you take these pieces off, you place them in the order that you're taking them off in. So we've got top cap, silver spacer, small black spacer, large black spacer, cone, silver spacer, and this center silver spacer you're going to get rid of. You're also going to get rid of this center silver spacer. So the ones that we're keeping are the blacks and that silver there. Now we're going to take the front, we're going to slide it up and through. Once you've placed your front fork through the frame, make sure that your brake caliper is facing backwards towards the rear of the bike. And we're just going to line up this front section, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to replace these spacers on in the exact same order that they are removed. So we've got the silver cone, got the large black cone, large black spacer, small spacer, and now here we're going to take the handlebars, and those handlebars are going to go after the spacers. Now if you wanted to bring this down a little bit, you could add those spacers on top, but we're just going to keep them in the same setup that we had. And you're going to want to make sure that the entire stem is lined up and everything is sitting correctly here. Then you pop your top cap back on and carefully thread in this top screw. And we're not going to tighten this very much, just so that it's tight and it's holding. And now we're just going to make sure that our front headset is all set up correctly. We're just going to very lightly tighten that up just so that it's sitting firmly Okay, but not too firm. Make sure everything is straight. So now you're going to want to take a look at the front of the bike, and you're going to try to make sure that everything is nicely lined up before you tighten this up. And then we're going to tighten up our stem bolts. And like anything that's got two bolts in this kind of a pattern, we're going to want to go back and forth a few times to make sure that we take the play out of this. So we are getting there. Next, we're going to be taking our seat out. And when you know that when the seat is coming out, you must be getting close. We're going to be installing our seat onto here. So we're going to be using what looks like a 6mm Allen wrench, and we can actually go ahead and extend our seat post. And I'm just going to go ahead and tighten up these screws here. So now we can take our 6mm Allen key and we can use that to loosen our seat post clamp. All right, so now we have our seat on and we can go ahead and flip the whole unit over. As now we can start to get ready for putting the final touches on. For this, you're gonna need your crank bolt that they've supplied you and the 8mm wrench. So now you're gonna take your Gates carbon drive crank that you have and making sure that you're positioning it 180 degrees from the direction of your opposite crank, you're going to slide that onto the bike. Then you're going to insert that crank screw and you're going to use the 8mm Allen wrench to tighten it down. And they've claimed a total torque of 40 Newton meters on this, so that's quite a bit. I would advise getting a torque wrench out to check this, to make sure that you're going to the right torque, not over torquing. Because 40 Newton meters is quite a bit. So we're gonna go there and we're gonna get out the torque wrench after to check that bolt. Next, we're gonna be placing our rear tire on. So we've got the rear wheel, which has the motor on here. And so we're gonna take this, we're gonna slide it in. Making sure that the cable on the back is not getting impacted. And there's only one way for this to slide in. It's going to slide all the way through. After we've placed the rear wheel on the back, we're going to make sure that our motor cable is pointing down. In this case, it's up because we have the bike upside down. And then we're going to be taking the other thing you're going to want to make sure is that you have the belt drive located behind the wheel here. And now we're going to be placing the belt drive on the rear freewheel and then taking it, making sure that they're located pointed towards the back of the bike. We are going to now we've placed our belt drive onto the system. We've got it on the rear freewheel and on the front. And now we're going to take a 4mm Allen key, and we've got a set screw on the rear of each side of the motor. And we're just going to tighten this so that it's touching the set screw that we have here, which they've already set for us from the factory. So we don't have to think about this. All we have to do is tighten this up so that these set screws are touching. Now these can be adjusted later, but they really shouldn't need to be adjusted because this belt is not going to have a whole lot of change in its tension over its life. And that's one of the good things about a belt when we're comparing it against a chain. So we're just going to tighten these and make sure that these are sitting against these. So we just don't want to over tighten them. We're just tightening them just enough so they're up against the set screws. And that's got our belt system now tightened onto our cranks. Next, you're going to go and you're going to take your R gasket bolts, which they have on your information package, and you're going to take these two dropouts, which they were given to you on each side, and you're just going to be placing these back on and using the 4mm to set them in place. And they're going to make sure that your dropouts aren't able to move on you. Now we can go ahead and tighten the bolts on either side of the rear wheel. Now we're going to be taking this motor cable and we're going to be moving the motor cable along the lower chainstay, and we're going to be dropping it through this hole that we have at the bottom of the bottom bracket. We're going to hook that and we're going to pull it up and through the hole from that compartment that we opened up. Once we have that, we can then connect the yellow connector to the yellow connector, like so, and the green connector can go into the green connector. Now there's some very small pins in this, so just be careful and make sure that you line it up as best you can so that those pins don't get damaged. And you're just going to press those cables back into the bottom. Now you have this cable which is in the way, so you're going to take your two cable guide screws and a screwdriver, and they've given you this black piece number 18, which is going to go right over top of the cable, and there's some little holes here that you can use . Now that you've finished placing those screws onto that lower cover, you can go ahead and you can replace the 4 3mm hex screws that hold this bottom compartment in place. Now to finish things off, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put on the rear brake caliper, and we're gonna install the front tire, and we're gonna get these brakes set up. So you're gonna go ahead, and the first thing you're gonna wanna do is remove the plastic clip from in between the brake pads. And we're gonna go ahead and pull the screws off of the caliper bracket. Then we're going to place the caliper behind the mount here so that the pads are going on either side of the brake. Okay, so we've got our rear brake caliper on, and we're just tightening up these screws. That are going to keep it in place. And then we're going to need to do a little adjustment after on these brake calipers, just to make sure that we're running nice and smooth. Once we've got our rear brake lever on, now we're going to go ahead, we're going to remove the front through axle that we have. We're going to take it, we're going to make sure to remove the black pin out of the front brake, and then we're just going to slide our front wheel on right in between that caliper. We're going to insert our through axle, and then we can go ahead and tighten that up. Next, we're going to take our kickstand, and we're going to locate the two bolts that we have for the kickstand. We're going to place it right here at the back, and we can go ahead and install those two bolts for the kickstand. Now with the kickstand on, we're able to flip the bike over, and now we can go ahead and we can place the brake levers onto the bars. So to do this, we're gonna have to remove these grips that we have here. And we have our light connector up here, which we can connect. So another one of these little green pins, just be careful to make sure that you don't accidentally squeeze those pins. We're going to need our 3mm Allen key, and that's going to allow us to remove these lock-on grips. And then they just slide off the end of the bike, which will then allow us to slide our Tektro brake levers onto the bars. And using a 5mm hex, we can tighten our brake lever. And now you're going to want to do the exact same thing on the other side. And we're going to feed some of this extra cabling through from the rear, making sure that it sits nicely. We're going to make sure that we're not putting any pressure on the brake line, so we have just a little bit of slack, and also that it's not going to get stuck in the rear tire. And then we can take the front and we can just slide the brake lever over. If it's not going on very well for you, check to make sure that it's loosened. Mine is not loosened, which is why we're having a little trouble getting that slid over the front. And then you're going to go ahead and then you can go ahead and slide your handlebars back on before you lock them off. Now finally we can dig into our accessories. They've given us some clips and a few items that we can use here. So you can go ahead and start placing a few of these other items into some of the slots that they have available for them. And they're just gonna clean up the look of some parts of the bike and let you really clean up how things are looking. So we're gonna put some cable management ties on here. They got large and small ones, and that's just gonna let you clean up the front of the bike, as well as adding reflectors and some end caps onto those handlebars. So the last thing that we're gonna wanna take care of here is we're gonna put our pedals on. So these are the Well-Go pedals. They are marked for the left and right side of the bike, and these pedals are always going to screw on towards the front of the bike. We're going to go ahead and use our 13mm wrench here to just tighten the pedals on. And there we have it, the fully assembled bike. Now we're gonna go ahead and take a look and go through and do a little bit of a bolt check on here to make sure everything is up to torque, fill the tires up with some air, and then I think it's time to get riding and see how this bike performs.